Fremont family, and welcome to our sermon discussion podcast, where we are discussing the sermon that took place on August 10th, titled The Beginning of the Story. The big idea is the eternal creator creates creation. And the 2 points that will structure our conversation is number 1, the creator creates everything. Number 2, the creator promises fullness from emptiness. And we'll be discussing Genesis 1 through 2. My name is Holly Winkle. I'm the communications director.
My name is Emily Richter, and I'm excited to help out with Kids Connect starting in September.
And I'm Dave Drotz, and I'm kind of like a jack of all trades since I'm retired. So it's like I'm fitting in wherever, from elder to, 3 to 5-year-old Sunday school teacher to a little bit of music on Sundays and greeting on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your guys' service at the church, and thank you for being here for our discussion. We only have 2 verses to discuss, so I'm just going to read them real quickly. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." And I know that Pastor Dave has been giving just a summary of what's to come over Genesis 1 through 11 as we start this new series. And he's been talking a lot about foundations and how this Genesis is laying the foundation. And so we see a lot of foundational things for in the beginning here in this portion. And even in my study Bible, when I was looking at it, there's the 2 verses, and then there's massive amounts of commentary because there's so much to be said on these 2 verses.
Yeah, when I was first given this week's passage, what am I going to talk about with 2 verses? But then it just led me down all these rabbit holes into the different parts of the Bible from beginning to end, and from Isaiah to Psalm to Revelation to Exodus. It's really amazing that 2 sentences can really take up so much of your headspace.
Yeah, well, it's the foundation for the whole Bible.
Right. There's a lot to think about within that.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of the story that frames all the other stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Dave talked about using Christ to look back through the Old Testament and help us as we're looking at these old stories, make sense of them through the gospel. Because we're Christians, and so we start with Christ, and then we look at the Old Testament. And again, this is where this story begins for the Hebrews, and it begins for us.
Right, yeah. 1 Corinthians 3:10 through 11 says, "According to God's grace that was given to me, I have laid a foundation as a skilled master builder, and another builds on it. But each one is to be careful how he builds on it, for no one can lay any foundation other than what has been laid down. That foundation is Jesus Christ." And so we know that he's the foundation, and he's there at the beginning because of the famous verse in John 1 through 2. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God." And so we see the beginning of creation, that God already eternally existed along with Jesus, and we see the Spirit of God there. And so we know that the Trinity is present, which is powerful.
We wouldn't see Jesus in this moment if we didn't know the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
So it's, reading the Old Testament without Jesus is reading the Old Testament like Hebrew, or like the Jewish people in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we know that verse, we can go back and look freshly at, Genesis 1:1 and see Jesus right there, which is exciting.
Pastor Dave, he did talk about the Hebrew audience and Exodus, and like they're learning about what their part in God's story is, and like you said, they don't know that Jesus is there yet. They don't know that the Messiah is there yet. But how awesome for us to know about that treasure, and now we can look at the Old Testament in a whole different way.
Even if you don't know about Jesus yet to this point, you still know that there was a creator who created everything and who was there before our time started. And he didn't do it for himself, but he did it to bring us to him.
Yeah, David commented on that in the sermon. He was just talking about how God is these 3 parts, living in this love relationship forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that, he wasn't a God who had need. He wasn't like, oh, we're just not complete.
Yeah, I'm lonely.
I'm lonely. But that he was love, and love has to do something. It has to go somewhere. It has to serve someone in a way. and that he would want to invite that love into this creation. I mean, that's a beautiful story, right? Makes you feel valued.
Yeah. Being a part of a bigger story and being chosen to be in that story. And to know, there's a verse that talks about that God is the author and perfecter of our faith. And that also in, I believe it's Psalm 139, where it talks about that every day is written in his book. And so for us to be so intimately known, planned out, and prepared and spoken into existence, God, we were originally on God's mind, and he speaks us into existence, is it's tender in a way where we know that we're on the mind and the heart of our Father.
And even from the beginning, I think you guys here know, but I was a high school counselor and I'm retired, but for a lot of years. And the thing that made my heart ache more than anything was seeing that, a lot of young people in our world, and I saw them, individually daily, who are lost because they don't know about this story. They don't know that there's a story that they're written into, and that this is a story that about a God who loves them and is going to be there for them. And so occasionally I would break form as a public counselor and tell students that.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't tell my superintendent or principal or anything, but to say to them, look, you know that there's a God who loves you, and that could be part of your story. So you don't have to search for all these other purposes in this world that are certainly going to lead us astray. You can start with the real story. This story right here, that God began things and for a purpose, and you're part of it. And so we need that.
Absolutely. I wrote down a note. Pastor Dave said that God was fashioning a temple to ultimately dwell in us. And so he's creating the world, the earth, the globe, the inhabitants, all of the beings there. And it wasn't just for him to be an outside observer, but for him to step in and be a participant, which is powerful. He ultimately wants to dwell with us and be close and near to us. And so we see that example in creating earth and then allowing us to then become the tabernacle of the Lord, which is powerful.
He created us for a purpose, and not just to be separate from us or to be off in the distance, like you were saying before. He wanted to be with us, and he created us, eventually, we'll see in Genesis, to be with us. And then we went and sinned against him, and that was taken away from us. And we'll see later on that he comes back and tells us again that he's going to go and prepare another place for us where we will be restored with him. And then in Revelation, we'll see that it comes full circle, and he'll come back and come and get us and take us to that place that we really belong, that we'll be able to live with him in the fullness that we're designed to live with him.
I was watching a documentary on the Apollo 8 mission. And so Apollo 8 is when they shot around the moon. They sent the astronauts in around the moon. It was before they were landing. And so they were in orbit around the moon. There's these astronauts in the rocket ship, and they were broadcasting this to over 1 billion people saw this broadcast. And as they were curving around the moon and they saw the image of the Earth from the moon's perspective, they read the first 10 verses of Genesis.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my goodness, God will put 3 people in space to preach his word to the entire globe. Like, that's powerful. Like, so if we look at it from a different perspective where we're, people are like, oh, we shot a rocket into space. And God's like, I just did that and allowed you guys to do that so I could preach to that many people. That's 1 in 4 people that were on Earth in that time in 1968.
1968.
Isn't that crazy?
I'm the only one here that was around at that time.
Do you remember that? Were you watching on Christmas
You watched
Eve?
it later on.
I probably was watching something like that. And I want to go back to your point too, which is there's a song from 1990 by Bette Midler, if you remember her.
Yes.
Oh, they're old enough to remember her. That's good. And it's called God, From a Distance. And it's one of the lines is, God is watching us from a distance. But then you read what we just read, well, first of all, we're not there yet, but we're going to be, he actually walked with us in the garden.
Yeah.
And then Jesus tells us his name is Emmanuel, God with us. So God's never been at a distance. He's always wanted to be close to us. And so he's the same yesterday, today. So he was walking with us in the garden, and Jesus is saying, I'm with you always, and my Holy Spirit will be with you and guide you and comfort you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. So it's amazing. Mm-hmm.
About a year or so ago, I was at the beach on the Central Coast, which I go there often. My parents live there. And I realized that I always think, wow, the ocean is so big and beautiful and powerful, and the waves are crashing, and the sunset is the same, and the sky is like the perfect shade of blue, just, right ahead. And it was then that about a year ago, that I realized I'm thinking about the wrong thing. And so since then, I've put it into practice. I no longer say, wow, like the ocean is so big, beautiful, and powerful, or the sky is a perfect shade of blue. I instead focus, wow, God created the perfect shade of blue. God created something that is so powerful, and the ocean can create and destroy and do all these great things, and all the things that live in it. And so it's the mind shift for me, that I was really seeing the creation, the creator instead of the creation, for the first time in an intentional way.
Yeah.
I think that's a really powerful thing when you can look and see something and not see, and you can see beyond it, and you can see the person or the being that created it instead of what he created.
Yeah. We need to distinguish between the creator and the created, and that we tend to diminish the creator, and we even tend to put ourselves in the place of the creator. And I was interesting. Lori and I were in Europe recently, and we were in Amsterdam, and that's where Rembrandt was from. And we visited his house. And so, you see some of his works of art, not all of them. A lot of them are in famous museums, but you focus a lot on who he was as a person. He's the guy that made these beautiful paintings. They're beautiful in themselves, but they direct us to him and what kind of a person and how gifted he was. And so like you're saying, and again, it says it in Romans, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what he has made. And then the psalmist, the heavens are telling of the glory of God. God put that stuff there to bless us, but also to direct us back to him, to remind us that he's with us, not that he's at a distance, but that he's with us.
To help us see and understand, I think, more of him too. Yeah. Because if we took the time to recognize all of the different variety in his creation, from the biggest down to the smallest tiny little atom, it would overwhelm us with the amount of things that he has created, like trillions and trillions and trillions. And they're all different and unique. And then same with humans. You'll never meet a human that's quite alike. Everybody's different, and it's all this wide variety that comes from the mind of God. Every little thing fits together perfectly to be able to coexist, and only a divine designer can do that. And so it just makes me in awe of the mind of God.
It's all connected. We're all connected.
Yeah. I like how Pastor Dave brought up the Westminster Confession of Faith when they were trying to define God, and that God is transcendent. And then the elements that they came up with were, number one, birthed from a prayer. So way to go. And then, and the things are the Spirit. He's infinite, eternal, unchangeable, full of wisdom, power, holiness, justice, goodness, and truth. And that's just like a little scratch of the surface, but we see all of those things in his creation. If we take the time to sit, ponder, observe, we can gather those things by looking at the designer.
Right. And I think he talked about too that he basically, he's different from us as a creator, because we all have creative instincts, and in some ways that's a reflection of God in us, that he made us in his image, right?
Yeah.
But that he creates out of nothing. And there's a Latin word for that, ex nihilo, this Barad idea that that God somehow can make something out of nothing, which is what we need. Like a lot of times we get in circumstances where we need somebody to save us from stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't have the ingredients to do it, and we don't know anybody that does. But God does, because he can do things out of nothing.
What is the saying? I don't know who said it. There's nothing new under the sun.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, that's in Ecclesiastes too, right?
Oh, I was going to say a song. I'm looking at you. So what song are you going to sing?
Yeah. Well, let's see. Here comes the sun. No, that doesn't work.
No.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Ecclesiastes. Yeah.
There you go. So there's nothing new that we can make, and everything that we do make comes from God. But he is the only one that created something from nothing.
Right. Like God created the earth and he created trees, but we take those trees and we make furniture.
Right.
I was going to say paper, but yes.
Yeah, Pastor Dave mentioned that we have a micro story in his macro story.
Right.
And so we all are a part of his story, and he chooses us like, hey, I want you to make furniture. Take these things that I've already made and put them together and make them. And so like you're saying that, we have this natural desire to want to create things. Even kids, we were in children's ministry today, and they just want to make stuff. They want to make stuff out of Play-Doh. They want to make art.
Anything.
It's just natural for them to want to like make something, put it together and go, look what I made, So God allows us to do that but he is the great architect.
Yeah, I was thinking of dentists when you go in or I guess a doctor more does this, but they'll ask you to open up your mouth and they'll have you say, awe, right? And that's what Dave was talking about, awe, that we're supposed to, and again, as we think of people in our lives that we revere, and they might be like great athletes, or they might be great musicians, or politicians, probably not so much, but, or artists, like I was saying, Rembrandt.
Yeah.
And they do. They have this expertise or this something that we think, wow, I mean, the fact that they can do that, most of us can't. But then you get to God, and he's the authentic awe. I mean, he is awe with capital AWE, because he does things that nobody else can do.
Right.
And we don't even understand. It's so complex what he can accomplish. Can't wrap our minds around it.
Right. And I think that points to looking at the gifts and highlighting the gifts more than the gift giver. That's the same type of principle. But he's the one that designed and created all of the gifts and made the person with all of the life experiences that makes them who they are, so that they can then, do his work and his will on this earth. And so we have to recognize that's God's creation. And it was his idea, not that person's.
Well, it's just amazing to me that the God who created the heavens and the earth and the sky and everything in it chose me. How do you wrap your mind around that and truly understand that fully? But it's still amazing. I don't want to question that, right?
Well, I think these are all things that the believer ponders over a lifetime. It's trying to understand and receive and grasp the love of God. Like we can intellectually know what was done, but for us to experientially walk through that, it takes a lifetime of walking with the Lord, and then you realize it more and more as you continue to walk with the Lord.
That kind of draws us into worship, like we were singing today. And some of those songs were really drawing us in because they help us recognize how good God's been to us. It's like you said, when the Apollo astronauts being distanced from the Earth, they think they can see what God's done, and then you think, he cares about me.
I know.
Like you said.
Whoa.
I mean, what am I? I'm a dust speck, but he cares about me even and you have those moments of awesomeness where you just recognize how big he is and how little you are, and yet he loves you.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So the second part of the scripture too was that Dave broke it down into 3 points. Number 1 was the earth without form and void. And number 2, the darkness over the face of the deep. And number 3, the Spirit was hovering over the face of the waters. And he used an analogy of the house and the home. And I was thinking, like God creates the cookie jar, and then he creates the cookies that go into the cookie jar. One of the things that I was looking at during this time was I was just prayerfully asking God to fill the void in my life, because I think that, you brought this up, Dave, about the students and, who were lost. And really it's a void. There's a void in our own hearts when we're separated from God, and we need him to come in and fill it. And we don't receive the complete fullness of that until we receive Christ Jesus. And so he's the one that fills the void ultimately.
Yeah, it's easy to fill a void with all the distraction that is given to us every day.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even have to seek it. It's just right there. Whether it's sports or entertainment or shopping or whatever it is, it's so easy. All those distractions, all those things are right there at our fingertips. You don't have to think about it at all. It's provided for us in our culture. So the only thing that can fill that really is God. And that's the way that he created it to be, going back to creation.
Right, but we can sometimes allow the wrong things in our heart, so he has to go into the cookie jar and take out the rotten cookies and put fresh ones in.
Yeah, the house and the furniture analogy, that was really brilliant. Good job, God. Working through Dave.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what would you guys say is the final takeaway, the main point that really stood out to you the most?
Throughout this week, like I said at the beginning, the 2 verses led me all around the Bible. But this morning I woke up and I really was thinking about the story in Exodus. And God told Moses his name is I am who I am, and how humbled I am to have a God that chose me out of everything, and will work through me to further his kingdom. And then that, again, I've said in this podcast many times that he's the God of order.
Mm-hmm.
And so if he's doing every single thing in order, there is no chaos in that.
Mm-hmm.
So just having a God that is order, and that I don't have to go to all these different lowercase g gods for every little thing. I go to one, and that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. How about you, Dave?
Kind of said this a little bit, but I think that God, he's done all these things to point us to himself, that he is the story of all stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet he gives us a responsibility, and that is to tell others about that, because like I said earlier, we know all around us, our neighbors, people we work with. And I was just in Europe where, there's almost no talk of who God is anymore. So the world is empty. They're void, living in that void. They're looking for purpose. And God has already called us to help them connect the dots and see that who he is. And I think we have to do our part. I have to do my part better to share this story so people know where their story comes from. And I think it does. As they know this story, it's such good news, especially as we walk it through to the New Testament and Jesus, that, again, if more of our world knew this, it would change everything in terms of our whole societies. And so I think God's calling us to step into that.
For me, I think it's the foundation, and that the foundation is Jesus. And I was thinking about when Jesus shares a story about building your house on a rock. And it says that everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock, Matthew 7:24. And so the key is obedience, and obedience to Christ. And so when we see that divine order and the divine creation, we have a Savior who has shown us how to live and operate in this world that God has created for his purposes, his story, for him to work through us. And so we keep our eyes focused on Jesus and obeying him. And that's when we would walk on solid ground and be sturdy, stable, unshakable. And so I think that during my prayer time, when I was studying this, I was praying that God would help show me how I fit into his story, how he can use me in his story. And then also that just how the Spirit of God was hovering, that he would hover over me to empower me to do my role, my part, be obedient to Jesus in this story so that I'm a part of God's story and he can use me. God doesn't necessarily need me. He can use anybody else. And if he's still trying, if he wants to get work done, if somebody's supposed to eat a sandwich on the side of the road and I drove by and didn't give him a sandwich, he would have somebody else give a sandwich. But God is faithful to use those who are going to be obedient to Christ. And so that was just one of the things, just empower me to be able to do those. And there's a worship song called Rest on Us. And it says, as the Spirit was moving over the waters, Spirit, come move over us, come rest on us. And so that's just been my prayer. So thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to next week's sermon discussion podcast.